Hello everyone, and welcome to another webinar for Senior JS Dev. My name is Steve Olson, and today I'd like to talk about the third point of maintainable code. Remember that the first point is about clean code via conventions, and the second point is about testable code via design patterns. One of the most important skills for a senior JS developer is communication with others. This can be quite a challenge sometimes. More often than not, it manifests in some form of project documentation, which is point number 3, code visibility. This falls under any communication outside of verbal, interactive, live situations, like face-to-face meetings. And when it's done right, visible and transparent documentation becomes a vital tool for providing context, background, and understanding to everyone at your company on an ongoing basis. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Merry Christmas! In this episode, I will focus on my top 3 favorite tools to share with you. I love them because they're all free, easy to access and update, no account required, and most importantly, extremely easy to use with essentially no vendor lock-in. For this webinar, I'm going to skip making slides and do a live demonstration instead. So, let's get started. Senior JavaScript developers are often involved in the decision-making process for technology and architecture choices for an upcoming feature or project. But it's important to transparently capture and record the planning process so that a new team member can later look back and understand why certain decisions were made. I use the framework called ADR because I found it's very simple and very effective. ADR stands for Architecture Decision Record. Here's a direct quote from ADR's docs explaining the motivation behind it. One of the hardest things to track during the life of a project is the motivation behind certain decisions. A new person coming on to a project may be perplexed, baffled, delighted, or infuriated by some past decisions. Sound familiar? If it did, you're definitely not alone. ADR is a guide to help fix that problem with 5 simple sections in the document. First, a title. Everything needs a name. Choose a descriptive one, and perhaps tag it with a keyword too. Context. Everyone needs to know what information or data was considered and discussed around the decision. Number 3, the decision. Everyone needs to know what the final decision was, despite how it was reached. Number 4, the status. Everyone needs to know what state the discussion is in. Is it a draft, under consideration, delayed, accepted, rejected? Yep, that's okay. Implemented, etc. Consequences. Everyone needs to understand the resulting context after applying the decision. All consequences should be listed here, not just the positive ones. ADR is one of the most lean forms of documentation, yet its structure provides a framework for all relevant information about a decision to be captured. You can expand or limit the information in each section as your organization sees fit. Let me show you now a quick demonstration of an ADR document. It's super easy. Nothing scary. Here we go. Here is the wiki for my company, and I'm making a design proposal using the ADF framework. Let's go ahead and click on the design proposal and have a look. This is how I like to lay out my ADR documents. I mentioned that it is an ADR document, indeed. A simple table of contents. A date to track the history of the document, as well as the employees who have read the document and signed off if they need to. I like to put my status of the ADF document near the top so it's easy to find for anyone who's reading it. Next, I have my context section, which explains the problem that I'm trying to solve. Here you can see my company wants to add a blog to their marketing page. I've explained in the context that we like Google, so we're going to use its online tools. Notice here that an ADR document often has comments or sections to outline outstanding questions that the reviewers or other participants may have. Here there's a comment asking, have we considered other headless CMS systems like Contentful, Sanity, or Strappy? Taking suggestions from this comment, I've started to create sections for each of the systems under consideration. Here's one for Contentful. I can provide links, any analysis, or anything else that's useful in this section. In my outstanding questions table, I can ask something like, how will this affect the deployment process? Add my name, start it as under review, and when it's finished, mark it as complete. And we'll say, use a pre-build script for compilation during the CI/CD build step. Great. The next section is the decision section. This is obviously critical to any ADR. In this decision section, you can see that we've decided to use Google Sheets to host the blog in a single spreadsheet. And we go over a few more details. Make sure that you add enough details so that a future team member can come in and read the decision and understand exactly what was decided upon and how to implement it. Consequences is a section which deals with the resulting context after applying the decision. Oftentimes, context paragraphs will be turned into action points and perhaps other ADR documents of their own to explore the ramifications of the decision further. So for example, we understand that the auth solution isn't exactly fully fleshed out yet, and that's something that will need to be discussed later. We also acknowledge that this is sort of a prototype. It's a pioneering effort, and other teams might want to copy our decision. So we should promote this to other teams and be open to feedback and their contributions to helping this perhaps scale into a company-wide solution. That was fun. Well, at least as far as documentation goes. I'll share a link to the document as a template for you in the description below, so be sure to check it out. A picture is worth 1,000 words. We all know that. And our ADR document could use a little sprucing up. Images and diagrams almost always play a vital part of effectively communicating intent, structure, and the interrelationships of concepts in ways that words alone simply cannot. Which is why I love using the tools Excalidraw and TLDraw. They're drawing tools that have a raw or SketchUp feel to them, which actually helps team members avoid any hyper-focusing on what I call pixel and padding and pretty colors. But it still provides enough stylistic options to create recognizable patterns that quickly convey important cues and meaning. So let's take a look. First, let's open up Excalidraw. Now, let's say you are put in charge of creating a design document for a new backend architecture. Let's take our ADR example and say you had to add a blog backend to your company's marketing website. Here I've sketched up a couple of simple shapes using Excalidraw to represent several system components. This is the user's laptop, and I've drawn a dotted box here to represent the website. This is the server, and this is Google Sheets. Let's go ahead and label these. I'm going to choose the label tool here, hover over this, and call this my user. I'm going to center align it and give it a new color. And move it to the center here. I'll do the same for here by duplicating this text using Control or Command D, dragging it over here, double clicking, and I'll call this the server, the app server. And finally, I'll duplicate again and label this as Google Sheets. And I'll give it a color to match. Awesome. Now, let's indicate the relationships of these three system components using arrows. I'll select the arrow tool, give it a color, and show that this website is being served by this app server. Actually, let me go ahead and reverse this arrow. I like to indicate the way data flows. Awesome. Now you can see my arrows attached to the square. So if I move it, the arrow stays with it. Awesome. So that's great, but how does the blog relate to the app server? Well, I'll draw another arrow from Google Sheets to the app server, like this. And let me move it over here. Just to keep the diagram clean. Change its color back to green. Change its style to a dotted stroke style. And make a comment here using the text tool like that. You can come up with a better description if you'd like. There we go. Something simple like that conveys a lot of meaning with just a few pictures. Now let's say that we're happy with this and we want to add it to our document. The way we can do that is very simple. We select all of the components that we want to export, click on the menu, and click on Export Image. Now we can choose to export the background or not, only selected or not. We can scale our image to be larger. I'll choose 1x, and we can export it to a PNG file. We can export it as an SVG, or we can copy it to our clipboard. This is the option I'm going to choose. So I click on copy, and I'll head over to my ADR document, and I'll paste it into here. The image is instantly embedded into my document, and it's something pretty for readers to look at. Some other features I really like about Excalidraw are its live collaboration. So I can send a link to any of my coworkers, and we can actually collaborate on this diagram in real time together. That's pretty cool. Finally, there are some other tools for shapes and other objects which we haven't gone over in this webinar. So I highly encourage you to look at all the options, the backgrounds, the fills, the stroke styles, the different sloppiness levels, For example, you'll see how the lines change as they get more raw and sketchy like. I can also make my edges sharp or rounded, change the opacity, alter the layers, which shape is on top of which, and many other features. Ooh, one thing I forgot to mention really quick is another way to export data from Excalidraw. And that is, instead of exporting an image, we're going to use the Save To from the menu options. And we can export our drawing to disk in order to load it back up later using the Open command from the menu. Or what I like to do is embed a share link right inside of my Markdown document. So I'm going to click on Export to Link. And here you can see it's uploaded my data to the cloud and given me a URL so that I can fetch it later. So I'm going to click on that, copy it to my clipboard, and then paste it into my document. There we go. Now any reader can go ahead and click on this link and get that drawing back in its original state, modify it, export it as an image, export it as a link, and perpetually the document and the image can be updated and modified together. Cool, I just learned something new. Some wikis will recognize an Excalidraw link and allow you to embed it like an iframe right into your wiki. So let me embed this, and I'll click on the Embed Excalidraw context menu item. And it imports my Excalidraw right into my wiki document. So I don't have that extra step of following a link. That's very cool. Well, hopefully you enjoyed that little tour of Excalidraw and got excited to go and check it out. Next, we'll open up TLDraw and give it a spin. Let's pretend now that you needed to design some new UI pages for the blog. The UX for that can be sketched up in a matter of just minutes. Let's check it out. First, let's begin by opening up TLDraw.com. As you can see, it looks very similar to Excalidraw with a few differences. So let's explore that. Here I've started with a basic template of user flows coming from our home page on our web app, going to the blog list. By clicking on the items in my diagram, over on the left I can see the styles. I can change the color, whether I want it to be filled or not. I can change the dashes, the border size, and the fonts. Let's go ahead now and create a blog page that displays an individual blog post. I'll do that by selecting this blog list, hitting Control or Command D to duplicate it, moving it over here, and I'll also duplicate an arrow to show the user flow from one page to the next. Let's change the title of the page. And a few simple UX changes as well. I'll keep the hero image of my design, but add some places for body text, as well as a call to action. There, I like that all right. And you see how easy that was? Anyone can do it. Now let's look at how we can export my diagram and bring it into my wiki page. I can do that by selecting all of the elements of the diagram that I want to export, clicking on the menu button, going to Edit, Export As, or Copy As PNG, which will bring it onto my clipboard. And then in my wiki document, I simply paste it. Fantastic. However, there's no way for me to get a link like I could for Excalidraw in order to come back to this drawing program with all of the elements in the diagram. So that limitation is something to consider. Maybe you can think of some other major features or aspects that need to be thought through on this project. I know I can't. Most opportunities like this just scream for a diagram or two. Now, if you need a diagram tool that's a little less drawing focused and a little more text based, I always reach for Mermaid. It's a tool that can generate several types of technical diagrams based on a markdown grammar. What does that even mean? Well, it's more intuitive than you think. Let's take a closer look. Go to mermaid.live and let's explore what we see here. Before we go into all the sample diagrams that Mermaid can generate, let's start with the sequence diagram. I use sequence diagrams all the time. I love them. They bring so much clarity to a complicated process of system components interacting with each other. So with Mermaid, I signify a sequence diagram by saying sequence diagram as the first line of code. Everything under this tells Mermaid how I want to structure and build my sequence diagram. Here is where I can specify the actors and participants of my sequence diagram. I can use aliases in order to make the sequence a little more concise as I define it below. Now you can easily and quickly follow along to see how each component of the system interacts and sends events and messages to one another. My dev sends a message to the repo to say I've merged my PR. The repo then talks to the CI/CD build process and says, build this project. I've activated the CI/CD system component indicated by this gray bar here. Then the CI/CD asks Google Sheets in an API request to send the blog posts back to it. Google responds with a here you go. Then the CI/CD process uses those blog items, those blog posts, and compiles them into the final shipped web application. And finally, the CI/CD process is done, so we deactivate that system component, and the gray bar here is complete. This is just a simple example of what sequence diagrams can do. Let's check the documentation to see more things. When I open up the sequence diagram documentation, you can see we have a whole bunch of options. We can specify different message types by using different arrow syntax, such as dotted lines or async arrows. We can specify notes in our sequence diagram using the keyword note. We can specify loops in the sequence diagram. We can describe alternate paths in the sequence diagram, and even parallel actions that happen in the diagram. If you want to specify comments, just use a $% in your markup code. Here's the documentation for sequence numbers. We can specify URLs in order to explain the various actors in our system, like this. And there's so much more, so definitely check out the documentation. But what I've shown you here is about 20% of what you can do, which will get you about 80% of the way there. So it's a good start. So I'd like to bring this sequence diagram into my wiki page. The first thing I'll do is a simple copy and paste, because it's just text after all. Awesome, there it is. But what if I want an image along with this? Can I export that? I sure can. all I do is I click on the Copy Image to Clipboard button, and we'll hit Paste in my wiki document. There it is. But what if I want to link to it in order to edit it and re-import it later? Can I do that? You sure can. Just click on the full screen button here on the right. As you can see, that takes us to a full page view of this document using the /view URL, or I can just use the /edit URL. I usually use this. It's more convenient. So I'll copy that. And paste it in here. Do you think we can embed this as well? Let's try it. I love it. This is fantastic. Now let's explore a couple more diagrams that Mermaid can render just to get a flavor for all the variety it has to offer. The Live Editor offers you a lot of really convenient sample diagrams to get you started on the right track. There are flow diagrams like this, class diagrams, state diagrams, which are like an infinite state machine, ER, Gantt, user journeys, Git branches, pie charts, and even mind maps. Mermaid has so much to offer. I really encourage you to jump in, dig in, and find out everything that you can build with Mermaid in a maintainable, reusable diagram cornucopia. Well, I hope that you found this webinar useful and interesting in making your documentation better in order to increase the visibility of your project and your code. Now it's time for me to wrap up. But first, a bonus. I wanted you to know that every app that I've shown you today, you don't even need to open a browser to use. That's right, each one of them is a PWA, which means a progressive web app, which means you can install it on your computer as a normal application. How do you do that? Let me show you. Once again, thanks for joining me, and I can't wait to see you on my next webinar for Senior JS Dev. Until then, take care.